Danger might be closer than you think. Before we begin, like this video, comment where and what time you're watching from, and subscribe for more chilling stories. Now turn off the lights, get comfortable, and let's dive into the unknown. Story 1. I was 27 when this happened, working as an escort in São Paulo. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills, and I had my regulars who made things easier. I was careful, always choosing my clients through referrals or verified platforms. But every now and then, a new face would appear, and if the money was good and the vibe seemed right, I'd take the chance. That's how I met him, Lucas. He was different from the start. Soft-spoken, well-dressed, smelled like expensive cologne. He treated me with respect, didn't push boundaries, and always tipped generously. Honestly, he was the kind of client most of us wished for. At first, everything seemed normal. He'd book me once a week, always in high-end hotels, always the same routine: dinner, conversation, and then whatever he wanted, which was surprisingly mild compared to others. But the way he talked about me, that's what started to make my skin crawl. He noticed small things, things no one else ever did. You changed your nail color. Red suits you. Or, you had your hair done, didn't you? Looks beautiful. At first, I took it as flattery. Some men paid attention to details, and I figured he was just one of them. But then, the comments started getting too specific. One night, he smiled at me across the table and said, "I saw you at that cafe near your place the other day, the one on Rua Augusta, right?" I froze for a second. I had been there that week grabbing a coffee before work. I hadn't mentioned it to him, hadn't posted anything about it. I brushed it off with a laugh, pretending not to care. But that night, when I got home, I locked the door twice and pulled the curtains shut. Something didn't sit right. Maybe it was just a coincidence. Maybe he had seen me by chance. That's what I told myself. But then it got worse. The next time we met, he casually mentioned, "Your friend Anna looked really happy the other night at the bar. You two always go there?" My stomach dropped. Anna wasn't part of my work life. She was my best friend, my safe space. I never mixed the two worlds. He shouldn't have known about her. He shouldn't have known where I went outside of work. I laughed it off again, pretending I wasn't shaken, but inside my head was spinning. Was he following me? Had he been watching me this whole time? I started paying more attention after that, checking over my shoulder when I walked home, looking at reflections in shop windows, noticing every unfamiliar car parked near my building. I even asked Anna if she'd ever seen a man watching us at the bar, but she just laughed and said I was being paranoid. And maybe I was. But then, one night after work, I got home and found something waiting for me. A small envelope slipped under my apartment door. My stomach twisted as I bent down to pick it up, my hands already shaking. Inside, there was just one piece of paper. 4 words, written in small, neat handwriting. "I love your perfume." I felt the blood drain from my face. I had worn a new perfume the night before, one I'd never used with him before. I stood frozen in my hallway, gripping that note so hard my nails dug into my palm. How did he know? How did he get so close? My building had a locked entrance, a doorman during the day. Either he had followed me inside without me noticing, or worse, he lived nearby. I spent the night with my heart hammering against my ribs, every small sound making me jump. I wanted to believe it was a sick coincidence, maybe even a prank. But deep down, I knew better. The next day, I canceled our meeting. I texted him a simple, "Can't make it tonight, sorry." He didn't reply immediately, but when he did, my stomach turned. "No problem. I understand. See you soon." There was something off about it. It wasn't angry or needy. It was like he already knew exactly what I was thinking. That was the moment I realized I had to cut him off completely. I blocked his number, deleted his messages, and decided I'd be more careful with new clients from then on, but it wasn't over. A few nights later, I was walking home from the bar with Anna when I saw it. A car, parked a little too perfectly across the street from my building. Black, tinted windows, engine running low. I didn't see who was inside, but I didn't need to. I just knew. A chill ran down my spine, and for the first time in years, I felt real fear. Not just the kind that lingers at the back of your mind, but the kind that makes your whole body go cold. I hurried Anna inside and forced myself not to look back. I locked the door the second I got upstairs, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined footsteps outside my door. Imagined the sound of paper sliding under it again. I stayed curled up in bed, my phone clutched in my hand, listening for something, anything, that would confirm I wasn't losing my mind. But nothing happened. No knocks, no messages, no more notes. By morning, I started convincing myself that maybe it really was over. Maybe blocking him had been enough. Then, a week later, Anna called me in the middle of the night, her voice shaking. "He was here," she whispered, "outside my building, just standing there." My blood ran cold. I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that it had to be someone else, but I knew better. He wasn't just watching me, he was watching the people around me too. That's when I decided I couldn't just sit and wait for whatever this was to escalate. I went straight to the police the next morning. I didn't have much. Just a few messages, the note, my gut feeling. The officer at the desk barely looked at me while I spoke. He nodded, jotted something down and said, "We'll file a report, but unless he actually threatens you, there's not much we can do." That was it. I walked out of there feeling small, exposed. I thought about changing apartments, thought about quitting entirely, but I couldn't just disappear, not for him. So instead, I got smarter. I switched up my routes home, stayed in well-lit areas, always shared my location with Anna. I stopped working alone, and then, just like that, he vanished. No more texts, no more parked cars, no more whispers of him in the background of my life. I don't know if he got bored, if he moved on to someone else, or if something worse happened. But sometimes, when I walk home at night, I still feel it. That itch at the back of my neck. That nagging thought that I'm not as alone as I think. And every time I get that feeling, I wonder, was he really gone? Or was he just waiting for the right moment to come back? Story 2. I was used to meeting clients in fancy hotels, discreet apartments, and sometimes even their cars. But when this guy, Marcelo, offered triple my usual rate to meet him at a motel on the outskirts of the city, I hesitated. The money was too good to ignore, but something about it felt off. Motels were a different game. They weren't places where men wanted to be seen. They were for affairs, secrets, and things no one wanted to talk about. Still, I told myself I'd done worse for less. So I said yes. The place was exactly what I expected. Run down, neon sign flickering like it was on its last breath. The kind of motel where people check in, but no one looks too hard at whether they check out. Marcelo was already there, waiting by the entrance, leaning against the doorway of room 14. He looked normal enough, mid-40s, decent suit, salt and pepper hair, the type of guy who probably had a wife at home, maybe even kids. He smiled when he saw me, but there was something about his expression that made my stomach turn, like he knew something I didn't. The second I stepped inside, he locked the door behind me. That wasn't unusual. Most guys did that out of habit. What was unusual was what happened next. He walked to the nightstand, picked up my phone from my purse, and set it down on the far side of the room. He didn't say anything, just smiled and gestured toward the bed. A slow, deliberate movement, like he'd been looking forward to this moment for a long time. My pulse started to quicken. Stay calm. Play along. I perched on the edge of the mattress, forcing a flirtatious smile. Then he said it. "No one knows you're here, right?" I felt a chill run through me, but I didn't let it show. I'd been in uncomfortable situations before, and I knew the key was to stay in control, or at least make them think I was. I laughed, tilting my head like it was all a game. "Of course not, sweetheart. I don't mix business with my personal life." It was a lie. Anna knew exactly where I was. I had sent her the motel's name, my client's number, even a picture of his car in the parking lot. But Marcelo's smile didn't falter. If anything, it grew wider. "Good," he murmured, sitting on the chair across from me, legs spread wide, watching. For a moment, he just sat there, silent. The air in the room felt heavier, thicker, like it was pressing down on me. I glanced at my phone on the nightstand. Too far. If I lunged for it, he'd reach me first. My heart pounded against my ribs as I tried to plan my next move. Then, out of nowhere, he leaned forward and said something that made my blood run cold. "You remind me of her." His voice was soft, almost nostalgic. Same eyes, same way of smiling when you're scared. I swallowed hard, keeping my face neutral. "Who?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stood up and walked over to the closet, sliding it open just enough for me to see inside. My breath caught in my throat. Hanging from the hook was a dress, pale blue, delicate lace trim, the kind of dress someone would wear on a first date. It was clean, pressed, waiting. But that wasn't what made my stomach twist in horror. It was the shoes beneath it, small, dainty, and old, like they had been worn by someone who never walked out of this room. I felt my body go cold, but I didn't move, didn't flinch. If I showed fear, would only make things worse. Think. I forced a smirk and leaned back on my hands, pretending I wasn't fazed. "You dress up all your girls like this?" My voice came out steadier than I expected, but inside my stomach was twisting into knots. Marcelo tilted his head, studying me. "Not all of them," he said, "just the special ones." Every nerve in my body screamed at me to run, but I had to be smart. If I bolted too soon, he'd stop me. So I did the opposite. I smiled wider, stood up, slowly, and stepped toward him like I was playing along. His eyes darkened, pleased, but he didn't expect what came next. In one swift motion, I grabbed the lamp from the nightstand and smashed it against his head. The ceramic shattered, and he staggered back with a grunt of pain. I didn't wait. I grabbed my phone and sprinted for the door, my fingers shaking as I fumbled with the lock. I heard him groan behind me, footsteps unsteady as he tried to recover. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. Then, I got the door open. I ran. Barefoot, barely breathing, I didn't stop until I reached the motel office. The guy behind the counter barely had time to react before I was screaming for help, my words coming out in panicked gasps. The police arrived fast, faster than I expected, and when they stormed into room 14, Marcelo was gone. But the dress, the shoes, the eerie little setup, that was all still there. They never found him. I changed my number, stopped taking new clients for months, and moved apartments just to feel safe again. But every now and then, I wonder, was I the first, or just the first to escape? Story 3. I was exhausted that night. It had been one of those shifts where time dragged, and the clients were either too drunk, too cheap, or just plain annoying. All I wanted was to go home, take a hot shower, and collapse into bed. So when a new client messaged me, asking if I could meet him but insisted on picking me up instead of booking a room himself, I hesitated. Normally I'd say no. Too many risks. But the night had been slow and he was offering double my rate. I told myself it would be fine. He pulled up in a sleek black car, one of those newer models that barely made a sound. The windows were tinted just enough to make me uneasy. When he rolled them down, I saw him, clean-shaven, maybe mid-30s, nice watch, nice clothes. He smiled like he was completely harmless, the kind of guy you'd expect to see in a boardroom, not cruising around all looking for company. "Hop in," he said, voice smooth, casual, like we were old friends. I hesitated for just a second too long. That's when he added, "I promise I don't bite." Something about the way he said it made my skin crawl, but I smiled anyway, sliding into the passenger seat. The door shut with that soft, expensive click, and I felt a slight chill despite the warmth of the car. He was polite at first, made small talk about the city, the traffic, asked how my night was going. But then, his questions got weirder. "Do you live alone?" he asked at one point, his eyes flicking toward me for just a second longer than necessary. "Anyone waiting for you at home?" I gave him a fake laugh, brushing it off. "Nah, just my cat," I joked. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I glanced at the GPS on the dashboard, checking if we were going the right way. That's when I saw it. The screen had gone dark. No route, no destination. I turned to him, my heart already starting to pick up. "Speed. Where are we going?" I asked, keeping my voice light. His fingers drummed lazily against the steering wheel. And then, without looking at me, he said, "Somewhere quieter." My stomach twisted, but I kept my expression neutral. Panic was the last thing I needed right now. I casually reached for my phone in my bag, pretending to check something, but the second I clicked the power button, I saw it. No signal. I was about to make up some excuse, something like, "Actually, I need to go back. I Forgot something important when I noticed something even worse. He had locked the doors. I swallowed hard, trying to stay calm. "Hey, I actually changed my mind," I said, forcing out a little laugh. "You can just drop me off here." We were still in the city, but the streets were emptier now. Fewer lights, fewer people. He didn't respond. His fingers kept drumming against the steering wheel, slower this time. Then he exhaled, like he was thinking something over. Finally, he turned to me, smiling. That same polite, practiced smile. "You're nervous," he said. It wasn't a question. My pulse pounded in my ears. The car was still moving, but slower now, like he was waiting for something. I had to do something now. I looked down at my lap, pretending to fiddle with my purse, and then, in one fast motion, I reached over and yanked at the door handle. Nothing. The lock didn't budge. He laughed, a soft, amused chuckle like I had just done exactly what he expected. My heart was in my throat when he murmured, "They never open from the inside." I could feel my breathing getting shallow, my body screaming at me to run, to fight, to do something. But there was nowhere to go. The streets outside were unfamiliar and the car was still in motion. Then, without warning, he reached into his pocket and pulled something out. A small silver object. My mind raced. Was it a knife? Something worse? He flipped it between his fingers like a coin, keeping his eyes on the road. "You're not the first, you." "No," he said casually, "but you might be my favorite." I felt something snap inside me. That cold, paralyzing fear that had been creeping up my spine turned into something else. Pure, raw survival instinct. I didn't think. I just moved. My eyes flicked to the gear shift. Before he could react, I reached out and slammed the car into neutral. The engine whined, the sudden change jolting us forward. "What the?" he started, but I didn't give him a chance. I grabbed the wheel with both hands and yanked it hard to the right. The car swerved violently, tires screeching against the pavement. He cursed, trying to regain control, but I wasn't done. I elbowed him in the ribs as hard as I could, sending him crashing against the driver's side door. For a split second, his grip loosened. That was all I needed. I slammed my foot down on the door lock button and yanked the handle again. This time it opened. The cold night air hit me like a slap, and without thinking, I threw myself out of the moving car. I hit the pavement hard, the impact knocking the air from my lungs. My hands and knees burned as I tumbled, rolling over gravel and asphalt. But I didn't stop. I scrambled to my feet and ran. Behind me, I heard the car screech to a halt. A door opened. Footsteps. He was coming after me. My vision blurred with panic, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I ran toward the nearest streetlight, hoping, praying, that someone, anyone, was nearby. And then, as if the universe had decided to give me one last chance, I saw it. A gas station at the corner. I didn't stop running until I burst through the doors, collapsing onto the cold tile floor, gasping for breath. The cashier, a guy in his early 20s, stared at me wide-eyed, frozen in shock. "Help me," I choked out, "please." Before he could respond, I heard it. The unmistakable sound of tires screeching away. By the time the cops arrived, he was gone. No trace. Just a black car vanishing into the night. They never found him. Never found anything. But sometimes, late at night, when a car slows down a little too much near me, I swear I can still hear his voice. "You're not the first." Story 4. I've met all kinds of men in this job. The loud ones who brag, the nervous ones who shake, the angry ones who treat you like you're less than human. But then there are the quiet ones, the ones who don't say much, who watch instead of speak. They've always unsettled me the most. And he was the quietest of them all. I don't remember when. He started showing up at the club, but once I noticed him, I couldn't unsee him. Always sitting at the same table, same drink, same expression. Calm, unreadable, like he was waiting for something. At first, I didn't think much of him. He never caused trouble, never got too drunk, never touched the girls. That alone made him stand out. Most men came here for the experience, the attention, the thrill of contact. But not him. He just watched. And the weirdest part? He always picked me. Week after week. He'd pay for my time, sit me down at his table, and just talk. He never flirted, never asked for private dances, never even hinted at wanting anything physical. Just questions. too many questions. Where did you grow up? What was your childhood like? Do you live alone? I kept my answers vague. I'd learned early on that men like to think they know you, that you're opening up just for them. It keeps them coming back. But with him, it didn't feel like a game. It felt like research. I told myself I was imagining things, that I was being paranoid. But then, one night, after another long conversation that felt more like an interrogation, I stepped outside after my shift and felt it. That feeling. The one that makes the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. Someone was watching me. I glanced around the parking lot, my breath coming a little quicker now. The club was still buzzing behind me, music thumping, laughter spilling out into the night. But out here, under the dim yellow streetlights, I felt exposed, vulnerable. My eyes scanned the rows of parked cars, searching for something, someone, and then I saw it. A figure, half hidden in the shadows near the far end of the lot. I couldn't make out his face, but I didn't need to. I knew it was him. The same way you just know when you're being watched. He wasn't moving, wasn't walking toward me, just standing there, waiting. My heart hammered in my chest. I forced myself to act normal, to keep my pace steady as I made my way toward my car. But when I reached the door, my hands were shaking too hard to get the key in on the first try. I exhaled sharply, trying to steady myself. That's when I made a mistake. I looked back. He was closer. Not running, not rushing, just closer. Like the space between us had shrunk the second I looked away. My pulse pounded in my ears. This wasn't just some guy catching a smoke break or waiting for a ride. This was something else. He was waiting for me to see him. My stomach twisted. As I yanked open my car door and threw myself inside, locking it the second I hit the seat. My breathing was shallow, my hands clammy as I fumbled to start the engine. I didn't dare look up until the car roared to life, headlights cutting through the dark. And when I finally did, he was gone, just gone. I drove home faster than I should have, gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles ached. My apartment wasn't far, but every red light, every slow turn felt like an eternity. I kept glancing in, the rearview mirror, expecting to see headlights following me, but the road behind me was empty. Still, the unease clung to me like a second skin. By the time I reached my building, my hands were shaking so bad I could barely unlock the front door. I barely slept that night. Every sound outside made me jump. Every shadow in the hallway felt wrong. I told myself I was being paranoid, that he had probably just wanted to freak me out. But deep down, I knew better. And the next morning, when I opened my door to leave for work, my stomach dropped. Sitting there, perfectly placed on my doormat, was a single red carnation. I didn't touch it, just stared at it, heart pounding. No note, no explanation, just the flower. I slammed my door shut and locked it again, pressing my back against the wood as I tried to slow my breathing. He knew where I lived. That meant he had followed me home before. That meant this had been going on longer than I realized. I called in sick that night and spent the next few hours debating whether I should go to the police. But what could I even say? A man comes to my work, pays me to talk, and left me a flower. They'd laugh me out of the station. So I changed my routine, started taking different routes home, parked on different streets, stayed in well-lit areas, and just like that he was gone. No more flowers, no more long conversations, no more lurking in the dark. Maybe he got bored. Maybe he found someone else. But even now, sometimes when I'm out late, I'll catch the scent of a certain cologne in the air, faint, familiar. And for a split second, my heart stops, because I'll always wonder if he's still watching, just waiting for the right moment to step back into my life. Story 5. It started like any other high-paying client. Too good to be true, but tempting enough to make me ignore my instincts. He called himself Victor, though I doubted that was his real name. Said he was a businessman, worked with investments, had money to burn. I was used to men like that, flashy, arrogant, throwing around cash to make you feel special. But Victor was different. He was polite, soft-spoken, almost too charming. And when he invited me to spend the night on his yacht, offering a ridiculous amount of money, I hesitated. I had rules. I didn't like being trapped in places I couldn't leave easily. Cars, remote houses, boats. But he reassured me, said there'd be other people there, that it was just a little private party, nothing weird. "You'll be safe," he promised. "I just want good company." The way he spoke made it seem harmless, even considerate. And against my better judgment, I said yes. The money was too good. And at the end of the day, that's what I was there for. When I arrived at the marina, the air smelled like salt and gasoline, and the wind carried the distant hum of the city behind me. His yacht was massive, sleek, the kind of thing you see in movies. He was waiting for me on the deck, smiling like he had won something. The moment I stepped on board, I felt it. A shift subtle but unmistakable, like the world outside had melted away, and I had just stepped into something I couldn't step out of. There were no other guests. I tried to play it cool, acting like I hadn't just walked into a situation that suddenly felt wrong. I smiled, adjusted the strap of my dress, and glanced around like I was admiring the boat. "Thought you said there'd be a party?" I asked, keeping my tone light. Victor chuckled, pouring 2 glasses of champagne from a bottle already open on the table. "Change of plans," he said. "Just you and me tonight." The way he said it sent a ripple of unease down my spine. I looked past him, toward the marina, the dock now shrinking as the yacht drifted further into open water. My stomach tightened. I hadn't even felt us start moving. That was when I noticed the crew, or rather, the lack of one. No captain at the wheel, no deckhands, nobody. Just him, just us. I swallowed hard. Stay calm, play along. I took the glass he handed me but didn't drink. Instead, I leaned against the railing, feigning interest in the city lights flickering in the distance. "So you drive this thing yourself?" I asked, trying to keep the conversation casual. He just smiled, swirling the champagne in his glass. "You could say that," he murmured. His eyes never left me. There was something off about his gaze, like he was already picturing something I hadn't caught up to yet. I placed the champagne down, my fingers itching to reach for my phone. "Not yet. Don't let him see you panic," but then, just as I was about to make an excuse, say I had to use the bathroom, pretend I got a phone call, he stepped closer. "You know," he said, voice smooth as silk, "I picked you for a reason." I felt my breath hitch, but I kept my expression neutral. "Picked me?" The words echoed in my head. Heavy. Wrong. I forced a small laugh. "Oh yeah? And why's that?" My fingers edged toward my purse where my phone was. If I could just, send a message, a pin, something. But before I could reach it, he placed his hand over mine. Not rough, not forceful, just enough pressure to make it clear that he had noticed. "Because you remind me of someone," he said. "Someone I lost." My pulse pounded in my ears. Lost? Every nerve in my body screamed at me to run, but where? The yacht was already too far from the marina. The water stretched out around us, dark and endless. My mouth was dry. "That's sweet," I lied, forcing a smile. His grip didn't tighten, but he didn't let go either. He was studying me like he was trying to memorize something. Then he sighed, almost disappointed. "They always pretend," he murmured. At first, I didn't think. I just moved. With my free hand, I grabbed the champagne flute and threw it straight at his face. It shattered against his cheek, and in the half-second of confusion, I bolted. My heels clattered against the deck as I ran for the side of the boat. I didn't look back, didn't stop to think. I just jumped. Cold, black water swallowed me whole. The shock of it punched the air from my lungs, but I kicked, desperate, pushing myself to the surface. Behind me, I heard him yelling. The boat was turning, but I was already swimming for my life. I don't remember how long I swam before I saw lights. Another boat, a fishing trawler. The crew pulled me aboard, confused, asking questions I could barely answer. By the time the Coast Guard arrived, Victor's yacht was gone. No trace of him. No registration matching the name he gave me, like he had never existed. But sometimes when I close my eyes, I still see his face, that calm, patient smile. And I wonder, if I hadn't jumped, how long would it have taken before I disappeared too? Story 6. It started like any other booking. A man messaged me through a verified client site, polite, respectful, offering a generous rate for a private night at his place. He introduced himself as Daniel, sent over the details, and everything seemed normal. But I had a rule. If I was meeting a new client somewhere private, I always asked for a photo, just a way to gauge the vibe, to see if there were any red flags. He didn't hesitate. A few seconds later, a picture popped up. He looked average. Not too young, not too old, clean-shaven, well-dressed. Something about him felt plain, almost too plain, like a stock image of a businessman. But there was nothing outwardly strange about him, so I confirmed the time and address. When I arrived, his apartment was in a high-end building, sleek and modern, the kind of place that had a doorman and a private elevator. Good security. That put me at ease, at least for a little while. He greeted me at the door, smiling in that polite, controlled way men like him always do. The apartment was immaculate, tastefully decorated, and smelled like expensive candles. But something felt off. It wasn't anything obvious, just a feeling, like the air in there was too still, too quiet. I followed him. Inside, glancing around, letting my eyes take in the space. That's when I saw it. A picture frame on the table near the couch. It was him. Same suit, same smile, same exact photo he had sent me. But the frame was dusty, the edges of the picture slightly yellowed like it had been sitting there for years. My stomach tightened, but I didn't react. I just smiled, pretending I hadn't noticed. Maybe it was a coincidence, I told myself. Maybe he just liked that picture of himself. But something about it bothered me. The way the glass of the frame was slightly cracked at the corner, the way the edges of the paper looked worn, like it had been handled too many times, like it meant something. I sat down on the couch, crossing my legs, trying to keep my breathing steady. He poured us drinks, moving with that same eerie calm, like every movement was measured, deliberate. "You're even prettier in person," he said, sitting across from me, watching. The way he said it made my skin crawl. There was no warmth in his voice, no real emotion, just observation. I took a slow sip of my drink, my mind racing. Something's not right. Get out. But how? I had just arrived, and if I left too soon, it would be obvious I was spooked. Instead, I glanced around again, pretending to admire the apartment, looking for anything that might give me more context. And then, I saw another picture, and another. They were all him. The same expression, the same suit, different frames, different corners of the room, but all the same damn photo. A cold chill ran through me. My pulse was hammering in my ears, but I forced myself to keep smiling. Act normal. Don't let him see you're scared. I set my drink down, casually shifting in my seat. "You must really love that picture," I joked, keeping my tone light. His smile didn't falter. If anything, it seemed to widen just a bit too much. "It's the best one of me," he said simply. I didn't know what to say to that. Something about his voice, the way he said, like it was a fact, not an opinion, made my skin prickle. I had to leave, now. I reached for my purse, pretending to check my phone. "Actually, I just remembered I have to." Before I could finish, he spoke again. "They all say that." My breath caught. I looked up, meeting his eyes. "What?" He just smiled, tilting his head slightly like he was studying me. "They all realize it eventually," he said softly. "That something is off." My body went ice cold. I stood up fast, too fast, nearly knocking over my glass. My hands were shaking. He just sat there, watching, calm, like he'd been waiting for this moment. I didn't care anymore. I grabbed my bag and bolted for the door, yanking it open before he could move. As I stumbled into the hallway, I expected him to chase me, but he didn't. He just stayed where he was, still smiling. I ran all the way to the elevator, barely breathing until the doors shut. My hands were clammy, my heart pounding against my ribs. When I finally looked up, I saw myself in the elevator mirror, wide-eyed, pale, shaking. And that's when I realized something that made my stomach drop. In his apartment, there hadn't been a single mirror. Not one. Just photos. Photos of a man who might have never been real. Story 7. I was careful with clients. I had to be. The job came with risks, and I'd learned to trust my gut. If something felt off, I walked away. No amount of money was worth ignoring that instinct. But that night, I made a mistake. Not because I ignored my gut, but because at first nothing felt wrong. He contacted me through a referral, someone I'd seen before. That made me feel safer. Said he was passing through town on business and wanted to meet somewhere private. No hotels, no fancy bars, just a quiet dinner, then his place. He offered an extra fee for discretion, something about not wanting to run into colleagues. I didn't think twice. High-paying clients with secrets weren't unusual. When I got in the car, everything seemed normal. The dashboard was clean. The seat smelled like leather and soft jazz played from the speakers. He looked like any other businessman. Dark suit, nice watch, expensive cologne. He smiled as I buckled in, polite but distant. "Glad you could make it," he said. His voice was smooth, measured. I smiled back. No reason not to. At first we made small talk, how my day was, how long I'd been in the city. But then his questions changed. Subtle, but enough to make my fingers tighten around my purse. "Do you live alone?" he asked casually. "Anyone waiting for you at home?" I forced a laugh, playing it off. "Just my cat," I said, glancing at the GPS screen. The route looked normal, no detours, but something about the way he watched me, waiting for my answer, made my skin prickle. He nodded slowly, tapping his fingers against the wheel. "That's nice," he murmured. "No one to worry about you." My stomach twisted. That was the moment I knew something was wrong. I reached for my phone, pretending to check a message, but as I clicked the screen, my heart stopped. No service. I tried again. Nothing. My pulse quickened. "Play it cool. Play it cool." I turned to him, forcing a smile. "Actually, could you drop me off at the corner ahead? I forgot I have to—" The car locked. I heard the quiet click of the doors before I even finished speaking. His grip on the wheel tightened, knuckles going white. For the first time, his smile faded. He exhaled through his nose like I had just ruined something for him. "You're not going home," he said, voice lower now, more deliberate. My body went cold. I tried the door handle. Locked. Tried again. Still locked. My breathing turned shallow, heart hammering so hard I could hear it. The city lights outside blurred as he turned down a side street, one I knew wasn't on the way to his place. My mind raced. What do I do? I knew I had seconds, maybe less, before things got worse. My eyes darted around, searching for anything I could use. Then I spotted it. His phone resting in the center console, unlocked. Without thinking, I lunged for it. The car swerved as he grabbed my wrist, his grip tight, crushing. "You don't want to do that," he said, voice eerily calm. But I didn't care. I twisted, kicking the dashboard as hard as I could. The sudden jolt made him loosen his grip just enough for me to snatch the phone. I didn't even look at the screen, just hit the emergency dial and screamed into the speaker. "Help! I'm in a black sedan. He won't let me out." Before I could finish, he slammed on the brakes. The seatbelt cut into my chest as I lurched forward. The phone flew out of my hands, clattering to the floor. My whole body shook. Silence filled the car. Then, click. He unlocked the doors. I didn't think. I ran. I barely registered the sound of his door opening behind me, barely felt the pavement under my feet. I sprinted toward the nearest street, heart pounding, lungs burning. A car approached in the distance. Headlights. Blinding. Salvation. I stumbled into the road, waving my arms. The driver slammed on the brakes, honking. Before I could explain, I heard tires screech behind me. I turned just in time to see the black sedan disappear down the street, vanishing into the night. I made it to the police station, shaking, breathless. But by the time they traced the number I had called, the phone was wiped. No messages, no call history, nothing. Like he had planned for it, like he had done it before. They never found him, never found the car. But I knew he was still out there somewhere, watching. And sometimes when I'm alone at night, I still hear it. That quiet click of the doors locking. Story 8. I should have trusted my gut the first time I met him. He wasn't like the others. He didn't reek of desperation or arrogance, didn't try to impress me with fake charm. He was quiet, too quiet. Introduced himself as Marcos, dressed sharp but understated, dark blazer, neatly trimmed beard, expensive shoes that barely made a sound when he walked. He booked me for an hour at a high-end hotel, paid up front, and didn't ask for anything unusual. If anything, he was the easiest client I'd had in a while. But that was before I realized how much he knew about me. At first it was subtle. "I hope your shift wasn't too bad," he said as I settled onto the couch, like he somehow knew I'd had a long night, but I brushed it off. Maybe he just guessed. Then, when I poured myself a drink, he smiled. "You like whiskey?" "Neat, right?" I remember. My hand froze for half a second. I had never told him that. I laughed it off, pretending not to care. "Good guess," I said, but inside something twisted in my gut. I was careful with what I shared with clients, never mentioned personal details, never let them know who I really was outside of work. But Marcos kept dropping little things he shouldn't have known. He mentioned a cafe I liked, a book I had once posted about online years ago. Then, casually, almost, as an afterthought, he said, "How's your friend Anna? She still bartending?" I felt my stomach drop, but I didn't let it show. He shouldn't know Anna. He shouldn't even know she exists. I forced a laugh, tilting my head. "Oh, have I mentioned her before?" My voice sounded too light, too rehearsed. Marcos just smiled, swirling his drink. "Once," he lied. I knew I had never spoken about Anna with a client. I never mixed my real life with this job. My pulse pounded in my ears, but I kept my face neutral. The hour couldn't end fast enough. When I left the hotel, I practically speed-walked to my car, checking over my shoulder twice before getting in. I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe I had mentioned Anna at some point. Maybe he was just one of those clients who paid attention to details. But the unease lingered, sticking to my skin like humidity. A few days later, I found something that made my blood run cold. Sitting on my doorstep, wrapped neatly in brown paper, was a small box. No name, no note. Just my address, handwritten in neat, careful script. My fingers trembled as I peeled back the wrapping. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a tiny silver charm, an exact replica of the necklace I wore almost every day, the one Anna had given me for my birthday years ago, the one I never wore to work. I slammed the door shut, locked it, and backed away, my breath shallow. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't a mistake. Marcos knew things about me that I had never shared, and now, he wanted me to know that he was watching. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak in my apartment, every shadow outside my window, sent my heart slamming against my ribs. I wanted to believe I was overreacting. Maybe it was a gift from a past client, someone I had forgotten. Maybe I was just being paranoid. But deep down, I knew better. This wasn't some grand romantic gesture. This was a message. The next day, I canceled all my appointments. I needed to figure out how the hell he knew so much. I went through my messages, checked my social media, even dug up old conversations with clients. Nothing. No mentions of Anna, no posts about my necklace, no breadcrumbs leading back to him. It was like he had reached into my personal life and plucked details straight from my memory. That's when I realized he wasn't just watching me now. He had been watching me for a long time. I didn't go to work for a week. Every time my phone buzzed, my chest tightened. But Marcos never texted, never called, just silence. And then, on the 8th night, I found it. Another small package, this time slipped under my door. My hands shook as I unwrapped it, a sick feeling curling in my gut. Inside was a single slip of paper, folded neatly. 4 words, written in that same careful handwriting. "See you very soon."